Okay, so on to the endocrine system. Just one definition, endocrinology means the study of the endocrine system. So if you have a problem with your endocrine system, you would go to your endocrinologist. Okay. So unlike the nervous system with which the endocrine system works similarly to and in some cases with, the endocrine system sends messages to cells to perform a necessary action. Hormones are those messenger molecules. Now, so the contrast with the nervous system is that the nervous system is very quick and the actions are short. Like, what does the nervous system do? Sends motor commands, right? So all it does is very quickly um, contract the muscle, right? So the contrast is the endocrine system, hormones, right, are slow because they have to move through your bloodstream, and their actions can be for long periods of time. Case in point, um, growth hormone will be secreted for 25 years. So growth hormone is GH, 25 years. Okay? So that's the difference between the nervous system and the endocrine system. So the endocrine system is composed or comprised of small discrete organs which are dispersed throughout your body, and they secrete these hormones into the extracellular space to then be picked up by nearby capillaries into the general circulation to be delivered throughout the body. If the hormone finds a lock and key fit on the surface of a cell membrane, it will fuse at that point and the message will be delivered and the effect will um, then express in the cell. Therefore, the cells that don't have a receptor protein for a particular hormone will have no effect. So hormones only act on target cells. For instance, if a hormone was shaped like this, and you have a cell over here with a surface protein that looked like that, and this had a little plus charge to it, and this had a little minus charge to it, this would simply hop right over. It would search for this protein, and then it would have its effect on the cell. Very simply, that's how it works. So here are most of the organs. We have the pineal gland, pineal, whatever. This is in your brain, right here. The hypothalamus. Everyone knows where the hypothalamus is. The pituitary gland, which hangs from that infundibulum, if you remember from our brain dissection. The thyroid gland in up the anterior neck. The parathyroid glands, which are on the posterior side of the thyroid gland, but are completely discrete and separate and have completely separate functions. The thymus gland underneath the sternum, deep to the sternum, which basically disappears by the time you're 25. The adrenal gland superior to the kidneys. The pancreas, and the gonads, the ovaries and testes. So, kind of, know where these are, and their names. So, to stimulate one of these glands to actually secrete its hormone, there are three different mechanisms. So these are the three mechanisms: humoral or humoral, neural, nervous system, right, or hormonal. Okay? So in the humoral, the humors are the liquids in your bodies. So these hormones are released by altered levels of certain critical ions or nutrients. For instance, the parathyroid glands control calcium levels in your blood. Calcium is extremely important for like muscle contraction, and other critical functions of the cell. So you can't have too much and you can't have too little. So again, you have a homeostatic range, yes? So the parathyroid glands will control this. It can increase it when it's too low and it will decrease it when it's too high. Very, very simple. These little tiny glands are embedded in the posterior side of the thyroid gland. You can see the blood coming through. The hormones will be expelled into the extracellular fluid and be picked up by capillaries. So this is parathyroid hormone. This is the primary hormone secreted by the parathyroid glands. Okay, so the stimulus is a low concentration of calcium in the capillary blood, and the response is parathyroid glands secrete parathyroid hormone, which increases the blood. It also has another one called calcitonin. If the levels are too high, calcitonin will be released, and that will lower the blood calcium. Okay, so then we have neural stimulus. So this is when for instance, in fight or flight, right? Fight or flight. This actually has a hormonal fight or flight, right? So this is originated in the spinal cord and it goes out to the medulla of the adrenal gland, and this will secrete, as we know, epinephrine. So the action potentials in the preganglionic sympathetic fibers, because this is a sympathetic response, yes? The response is the adrenal medulla secretes epinephrine and norepinephrine. So that's neural stimulus of an endocrine gland. Then we have hormonal stimulus, and this is a hormone. Can't find where my a hormone is stimulated by another hormone. So here's our hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus has a blood supply, okay? The blood supply to the hypothalamus has a lot of molecules in it. And the role of the hypothalamus is to determine from these molecules what's high and what's low. Okay, and basically it's reading the hormone levels. It's a feedback loop. Is there enough growth hormone? Is there enough gonadal hormone? Is there enough adrenal hormone? Is there enough thyroid hormone? If it needs to make a change, it will send a message by a hormone, right, down through this capillary into the anterior pituitary gland. The pituitary gland has an anterior and a posterior. Okay, the posterior part is actually neurally controlled. Okay, so the anterior stimulus is hormones from the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is actually an endocrine gland which secretes hormones. These are stimulating hormones. And the response is the anterior pituitary gland secretes hormones that stimulate other endocrine glands to secrete hormones. So this would be a thyroid stimulating hormone, okay? And then the thyroid gland will then secrete T3 and T4, okay? So you need to know the difference between a humoral stimulus, a neural stimulus, and a hormonal stimulus. It's not difficult. So if we start with the pituitary gland, the hypophysis, right? Here's sort of a little orientation: corpus callosum, thalamus, and then hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is here. Okay, rich blood supply. Hanging from the infundibulum from the hypothalamus is the anterior and posterior pituitary glands. So here we go. Here's your optic chiasm above it, and then the infundibulum. And this is called So infundibulum is on the posterior side, and the anterior side now we have a different name called the pars tuberalis. You don't need to know that. I don't care that you know those, but you need to know the pars distalis. Okay, that's the big fat part of the anterior pituitary. And then the posterior part is called the pars nervosa. So that means the distal part and the nervous part. Okay, that's all. That's all you need to know here. So then here, the hypothalamus controls release of hormones from the pituitary gland in two different ways. The anterior pituitary is the hypothalamic hormones released into special blood vessels, which is called the hypophyseal, right here, let me find it, hypophyseal portal system. Remember, a portal system is one capillary bed to another capillary bed. And this will control the release of the anterior pituitary hormones. So the hormones, the releasing hormones that are sent from the hypothalamus are sent into this bicapillaries, right? These capillaries here into another capillary bed here. That's the hypophyseal portal system. So you have the primary capillary plexus, right there, right here. And then you have the portal veins, that's these here, okay? And then you have the secondary capillary plexus. So capillary plexus, the capillary plexus is a portal system like we have in the liver, and this is the hypophyseal portal system. So what happens when appropriately stimulated hypothalamic neurons secrete releasing or inhibiting hormones, okay, into the primary capillary plexus. Then hypothalamic hormones travel through the portal veins to the anterior pituitary, where they stimulate or inhibit release of hormones made in the anterior pituitary. In response to releasing hormones, the anterior pituitary secretes hormone into the secondary capillary plexus. This in turn empties into the general circulation. So these hormones are growth hormone, prolactin, thyroid stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormones, and follicle stimulating hormones. The posterior pituitary, this is different because their stimulation comes from a nerve impulse which travels down the axons of the hypothalamic neurons, down this, infundibulum, right? So the neural side travels down the infundibulum. That's going to stimulate, so bizarre, this portal system here. So here's what happens. The hypothalamic neurons synthesize oxytocin or antidiuretic hormone. Those are the only two hormones. You don't need to know these nuclei here. Supraoptic and paraventricular, you don't need to know them. They each secrete the different hormone, either oxytocin or antidiuretic hormone. So the antidiuretic hormone, that's going to go to the kidneys, and the oxytocin is going to go, I think, to the uterus. Oxytocin and ADH are transported down the axons, so a hormone is actually traveling down the axons. This is a very unique job for a nerve. So this will go to the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. You don't need to know that, to the posterior pituitary. Then it's going to go into these neurosecretory bodies in the posterior pituitary. So the terminal buttons here will simply release the hormone into this space, which is in the middle of a capillary bed, right? So these two, so you have blood coming in into capillary bed, blood going out. Now it has either ADH or oxytocin or both, and that'll go into the general circulation. Alright, so we're going to talk about parathyroid here. The parathyroid glands are on the posterior side of the thyroid gland. So this is the thyroid gland. And these parathyroid glands just sit embedded. You can see them if you dissected this out. You could see them. They're on the surface, but they're on the posterior surface. They kind of surround the pharynx. It's a very weird place to put them, but okay. Not for me to see. So I just want you to recognize where those are. Then we're going to move on to the adrenal glands, which sit atop the kidneys. Right? Then the cortex is around the outside, and the medulla is on the inside. Here's the capsule of this gland. This is called the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, zona reticularis, and adrenal medulla. I don't care that you know these zones, but the different zones secrete different hormones. You do need to know the hormones. Aldosterone, cortisol, which is like cortisone, right? And androgens, epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay? That's it. So, during times of stress, and that will be determined by the hypothalamus, a nerve impulse comes. It will synapse in the spinal cord, go out to the adrenal medulla, and that will stimulate the secretion of epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay? So again, this is a fight or flight response. Increased heart rate, you know all of these. Increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, bronchioles dilate, so forth and so on. Long-term stress starts in the anterior pituitary. These corticotropic cells of the anterior pituitary, right, are going to secrete a hormone, ACTH, into the bloodstream. That's going to be picked up by the adrenal cortex, and that's going to secrete steroid hormones, cortisone. Okay? The two different types, right, of corticoids, rather, are mineral corticoids, so they have a mineral attached to them, or the glucocorticoids, which have a sugar molecule attached to them. Okay, this is a mineral, so this will be a mineral. So this will make the kidneys retain water, blood pressure, and blood volume rise. In the glucocorticoids, proteins and fats are converted to glucose or broken down for energy. Blood glucose increases and the immune system is suppressed. When you're in sympathetic mode, you can't be in parasympathetic mode. So these are not healthy responses to stress. Stress is not healthy. Stress will can make you fat, can make you retain water. It screws up your metabolism and it depresses your immune system. So you get sick more often, you have this weight, you get lethargic. It's not good to be in a stressful mode. And students typically are very stressed. And that's why you get sick all the time. So let's move on to the pancreas. These are the pancreatic islets. Pancreatic islets. They produce glucagon and insulin, and these are the acinar cells. We talked about those in the digestive system. But the alpha cells are glucagon. This means alpha, A-L-P-H-A, and these are beta cells. So just know that alphas are glucagon and betas are insulin. And pituitary disorders, gigantism and dwarfism. Thyroid disorders, you can have protrusion of the eyeballs, hyperthyroidism, or enlarged thyroid. That's a goiter. Excess glucocorticoids. Goodness. You get this Dowager's hump, they call it, or this is Cushing syndrome. This is normal. Buffalo hump, whatever. Okay, here's the table. So if I were you, I would be able to identify the different parts of the different organs on the body, and I gave you a review sheet for that. And then you need to know what these different um, hormones do. So TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. Now, the thyroid gland stimulates thyroid gland to release thyroid hormones. So if you have too much, I don't know why they showed the back of the gland. Okay, so thyroid is basically to tell your cells, basically muscle cells, to increase metabolism. And the biggest reason to increase metabolism is to increase temperature, body heat. Okay? So if you have too little thyroid, you can get cretinism in children or myxedema in adults. Too much, you can get Graves' disease. And a very rare is Cushing's disease. So, the adrenals, adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH, in the adrenal cortex promotes release of glucocorticoids and androgens. Hey, buddy. Oh, that was my kitten. Okay. So these are the pituitary hormones. The first one is follicle stimulating hormone, and this will, the target organ is the ovary or the testes, ovaries or testes. In females, it stimulates the ovarian follicle maturation of an egg cell and estrogen production. In males, it stimulates sperm production. Hyposecretion is failure of sexual maturation, and increases no important effects. We move on to luteinizing hormone, LH. Again, the target organs are the gonads, and has the same effects as the FSH. Growth hormone, right? Target cells are liver, muscles, and mostly muscles and bones. This is growth hormone, okay? So we want all of our organs, bones, and muscles to grow, and then we want them to grow at the same rate so that your muscles grow at the same rate as your bones. So a decrease in growth hormone can produce dwarfism. Too much, gigantism. Okay, moving on to prolactin, PRL. Target organ is the breast, and this is for milk production. So too little hormone is poor milk production, and too much is too much milk production. So in the posterior lobe, we have antidiuretic hormone. Target organ is the kidney. And this causes the tubules to reabsorb water. Too little can cause diabetes. Too much can cause, well, it's just inappropriate secretion. So then you're going to retain water. Oxytocin, not OxyContin, but oxytocin. The target organs are the breast and the uterus. Stimulates uterine contractions for birth, initiates labor, and initiates milk ejection. There you go.